Right, my good people. So in today's lecture, we are going to be talking about comparisons and contrast. Well, comparing and contrasting, really. Okay. All right. 1 second, my good people. Okay, so comparing and contrasting, or comparisons and contrast. Cool. This, by the way, this PowerPoint is not, I didn't make it. So I will put in the link for the place where I got it from under the video. So why do we care, really? What's the point of comparing and contrasting? It's to actually show the similarities and the differences between at least two things. So it's always more than one thing going on. So why do we care? We want to inform, we want to explain, we want to analyze, or we want to evaluate something. The other alternative is to show the differences. So you're either showing the similarities between two things, or you're showing the differences between two things, and your purpose is to either inform, to explain, to analyze, and to evaluate. Cool. So how many things do you have? At least two things. You could have more, right? You can compare two or more things. And that's something you do on a daily basis. Maybe you go to a store and you look at two shirts, you're like, oh, well, this one is $10, this one's $15, and you kind of compare the prices. Well, it's the same thing, except now we're looking at words. In our context, we are comparing two sets of text, or two sets of information, or three, right? So for example, if we are comparing cars, right, and we are going to talk about or write about these cars, we have the BMW and we have the Honda Civic. Well, three categories in which they're different: price, mileage, and insurance. So we can say, okay, well, the BMW is this much, whereas the Honda Civic is this much, right? So when we organize it into charts that look like this, it becomes easier for us to look at the differences and the similarities, because we now have a visual rather than just a group of text, right? So if you are, let's say, taking a test and you are presented with two sets of text, or you are presented with two ideas and you're not sure what to do, or three ideas, or however many ideas, you can create a chart that looks like this. You can look at the text and think, okay, so what are the categories in which these are the same or that they fall under, and how do they differ in each category? Does that make sense? Yeah, how are we feeling over here? Yes? Okay. Let me know if I'm going too fast and I can slow it down. Cool? Another thing that you can do to show the similarities and the differences is something called a Venn diagram. I don't know who Venn is. I don't know if it's a name, but somebody came up with it, and I presume their name was Venn. I don't know. But basically, it's two circles that overlap. The sides that don't overlap are the sides of the differences, and the sides that overlap are the parts where you write the similarities. Now, granted, on the test, if you are taking a test, then this would not be the case. You won't have time necessarily to do this, but getting yourself trained in the ability to recognize the similarities and the differences as soon as you read something, or as soon as you start writing about something, it becomes so much easier for you to recognize it on a test. So you may not have time on a test to actually do this, but the more you practice doing this, the easier it will become for you to see the similarities and the differences. Does that make sense? Yeah, awesome. Okay, so now when we're writing and we are writing a thesis statement, mind you, if you're taking the the GED, there is a writing portion as well. If I'm not wrong, if I'm not mistaken, there is something that you have to write. There's like an essay component to it. And you can do this before you start writing, okay? So writing a thesis statement, can anyone here tell me what a thesis statement is? What is it? I can't hear you. It's part of the essay. It's one sentence or maybe two sentences in the essay. Anyone else? What is it? Yeah, like a hypothetical theory or what the point you are trying to make. It's almost as if like it's a topic sentence for the entire essay. So it's a topic sentence for everything that you are writing about and not just a paragraph. Okay? So when you are writing a thesis statement, you want to review your data. So before you start writing your thesis statement. So all of these, whether it's the charts or the Venn diagram, their purpose is for you to be able to pre-plan before you start writing your information, right? So when you have the Venn diagram, for example, and you want to fill it in with information, well, you want to look at the question and then come up with a thesis and look at the data that you already have before you formulate that thesis. So by looking at the data, we're looking at what you actually wrote within your Venn diagram. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So you have to decide to what extent you will stress the similarities between the two subjects and to what extent you will stress the differences. Again, in the Venn diagram, you have them listed, so you want to pick your points. Which ones do I want to say? Where do I want to side? In this side or on that side? In the charts, you also have the similarities and the differences. So you can choose, okay, do I want to talk more about the similarities? Do I want to talk more about the differences? And create a thesis statement that reflects that decision. Okay, so after you look at the information, then you can think, this is what we're talking about, and then hopefully it will make sense. Yeah? Does that make sense? Okay, so what does a weak thesis statement have? Well, a weak thesis statement would have somewhat alike, but somewhat different, right? It's something very general. If you're comparing and contrasting two things, you want to define and you want to have it be strong definition of these similarities and the differences. So saying something like they're both somewhat alike and somewhat different doesn't really cut it. Saying I can see some similarities and some differences too also doesn't cut it, because again, we are too general. Both of them involve, one similarity and one difference, right? Whatever it is, okay? Those are weak thesis statements. What you want to do, is this it? Okay. What you want to do is make a stronger claim. Now, this is an example, but what you want to do is make a stronger claim about the similarities and the differences, and be specific regarding the similarities and the differences. So, for example, and the example they gave us is, while both the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists agree that government was needed to establish order, right? So that's the similarity. That's how they are similar. The Federalists promoted a centralized federal authority, and the Anti-Federalists supported a loose confederation which favored states' rights. Okay, so we talk about the similarity, right, which was very specific, that they both agreed that the government needed to establish an order. They both agreed that there is a need for the government. And the difference was that one wanted authority that is federal, and one wanted authority that is on a state level. Does that make sense? Do you see it? So it's not a general statement of, oh, they have some similarities and differences. It's actually a very specific, very pointed, very direct statements and similarities and differences. Yes? Cool. Another example, Ralph and Jack have very different leadership styles and motivations, which leads to the eventual chaos and anarchy on the island. All right, so we can tell very clearly that they both have leadership styles and motivations, right? We can tell that. It may not be as clear, but we can tell that. But very clearly, we can tell that because those two categories are different, that causes chaos and anarchy on the island. So here we see that, remember in this slide, we talked about creating a thesis statement that reflects a decision of which extent do you agree with the similarities or the differences, or which ones you want to stress. In this example, we see the differences are being stressed. Does that make sense? So here, we're not really stressing the importance of leadership style, the fact that they both have a leadership style and motivation style. Here, in this case, we are stressing the differences, which then lead to chaos and to anarchy. Does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe? All right, for the people who are watching later on this video, feel free to comment down below and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. All right. So again, this is another one going back to our Honda and BMW comparison chart, right? We can say, in order to make a decision between a Honda Civic and a BMW, I use the following criteria. Price of vehicle, average mileage, and price of insurance. So this is, in this thesis statement, we have exactly what we are looking for. It tells us very clearly that we are going, in the following essay, we're going to be talking about mileage, we're going to be talking about price, and we're going to be talking about insurance. Yeah, it is a very, very specific, very detailed in terms of what it is that we are comparing. And that makes it a strong a thesis statement because we know exactly what it is that we are talking about. Make sense? Awesome. Okay, so here we are. This would be the same stuff that we were talking about earlier. Okay. So the first paragraph obviously is the topic paragraph, right? It's the introduction, kind of like this one, but maybe a little more detailed. Then in the second paragraph, this is a 5-paragraph essay, right? In the second paragraph, we'll talk about price. In the third paragraph, we'll talk about mileage. And in the fourth paragraph, we will talk about insurance. Yeah? Okay. So again, this is another way of just seeing the organization of how your essay would look like. If you do this beforehand, this is called an outline, right? If you do this beforehand, it becomes so much easier for you to pick up a pencil and write because it actually gives you a structure. All you need to do then is to put in the fillers. Does that make sense? All right. So if it doesn't make sense, again, you can comment down below. If you're here, you can ask me questions. All right. Again, we can break it up further into other paragraphs as well. So instead, if you're not writing a 5-paragraph essay and you want to break it up into different topics or topic per car, right? So, you have the introductory paragraph, and then you have the second paragraph, which is on price for BMW. Third is on price of Honda Civic, right? So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Does that make sense? So this is another way that you can organize a compare and contrast essay or writing prompt. Okay, so how does it look like in our outline? All right, introduction. It has a really good hook, right? Because you want someone to be interested in reading your stuff or watching your video, right? If you're doing videos, that's how we all get hooked on TikToks and on different things. They have a really interesting hook. All right, background information about the topic, and then the thesis statement. All right, paragraph 2, we have BMW, price, mileage, and insurance. Paragraph 3, price, mileage, and insurance for Honda Civic. And conclusion, which is you re-emphasize the major ties, so what, and you do an evaluation. These are all different ways of writing a compare and contrast essay, okay? This is, but they all follow the same procedure. You state one point, then you state the next. You have both in everywhere, right? You can divide it into 2 paragraphs per topic. You can write about the same, the 2 topics in the same paragraph. It is up to you, as long as you have both there and you are comparing to some degree certain categories. Yes? Awesome. All right. So again, you can do it this way, right? Where you have the introduction again, and then you do on price, BM, Honda, mileage, BMW, Honda, insurance, BMW, Honda, and then conclusion. Or you can also do the last part, which then you break it up into a paragraph. Well, in this case, they did. Okay. So transitions are basically words, connecting words, where you move from one topic to the other, right? Or from one sentence to the other. Some things that help compare or can transition into comparisons would be also, right? This car is like this, and also it is like that, as, right? As the, I don't know, the BMW is this in the same way, drives the car in the same way, or the, I don't know anything about cars, you guys, I don't know. But as you drive a BMW, you can drive a Honda Civic or whatever we decided to do, right? So you can do as, in the same way, like, likewise, similarly, comparable, equally, in addition. These are all things that compare. Which means that they are almost like the similarities, right? So the first side is really just the similarities between them. The second side is the contrast between them. So although, but, even though, however, on the other side, otherwise, yet, still, conversely, as opposed to, different from, and whereas. Okay, so again, these are words within the sentences that you can use to help you transition from one place to another. Yes? Yes, how we doing? Yes, people on the videos? All right, and a quick review. Make sure you understand the purpose of the assignment. Cool. So if you are being asked to read 2 texts and compare them, make sure you know that this is what you're doing and what it is that you are comparing. If you're asked to write something where you need to compare, also find out what it is you're comparing and how you're supposed to compare it, and so forth. So understand the purpose of the assignment, complete a pre-writing activity, right? So if you're writing, again, this may not be easily done if you're reading, but if you are writing, then go ahead and do a chart, do a Venn diagram, do something that will help you organize your thoughts into comparative formats. If you are reading, the more of these things you do beforehand, the easier it becomes to identify the similarities and the differences within a text that you're reading. All right, gather evidence. If you're writing, then for sure gather evidence as to how they're similar or how they're different. Create a thesis statement. Choose an organizational pattern. Figure out how it is that you're going to organize your essay. Is it by topic? Is it by paragraph? Is it by a category? Whatever it is that you want to do, just be clear and consistent in what you are doing. Write an outline, write a working draft, and revise as needed. Okay. All right. These are some additional resources that they have for us as well. So that is it for this particular video. If you're watching online and you haven't done so yet, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you are here and you have, so that I can answer your questions. If you're here and you have any questions, I'm going to stop the recording and you can ask me now.